When releasing a new game, one of the most important things that a dev team can do is build up hype for it. A couple of the earliest methods that have stood the test of time are putting out trailers leading up to the release that offer a glimpse at what the game has to offer, or to put out a demo that gives players a chance to get hands-on experience that will hopefully leave them excited for more. As the years go by, the industry has had to get more and more creative with the ways it grabs the attention of its audiences, and this vast ocean of trailers with the infamous not actual gameplay footage caption. The boldest option to arise from this release hype renaissance is that of the shadow drop. For those who might not know, a shadow drop is when a game is announced and immediately released, all at the same time. The most infamous example of this is the North American launch of the Sega Saturn console, which was, I don't know, probably a bad idea in hindsight. Nowadays though, especially with how quickly news can spread online, a shadow drop can actually work. Games like Hades prove that if the core experience is solid and you can show that off, you don't need months of drip-feeding information to convince people to buy it. A great game will be able to speak for itself. And last year, one of my favorite games to release just so happened to come from a shadow drop. Hi-Fi Rush came out of nowhere during an Xbox presentation in January of last year. Nothing about this game made sense on paper when it first came out. Tango Gameworks, a dev team that had only made horror games like Evil Within up to that point, was pivoting to a bright and sleek character action game. Everything from the art style to the gameplay was completely different from what they had made before. These changes to their usual formula were a surprise, but on their own, they wouldn't be anything unique. There was one element they introduced that would single-handedly define the entire game. Its beating heart, the total synthesis of music into every bit of its design. Part rhythm game, part character action game, all oozing with an incredible amount of style. I remember watching the launch trailer when it first released and being incredibly skeptical. Calling an idea like this ambitious would be an understatement. How do you take a genre that requires quick, precise reflexes and then tie your attacks, defensive options, and enemy movements to a strict rhythm? Any way I tried to look at it, I could only see it ending in disaster. The only way I could know for sure was to try it for myself. This pinch of curiosity was all that it took for me to download the game to my Xbox and give it a shot, and I am beyond glad that I did. This game is one of a kind and an absolute joy to play. I'm gonna try my best to explain why. So let's start jamming and see where this beat takes us. Unlike my last few videos, I'm not going to be breaking this up into separate sections. It's going to be a bit more of a meandering stream of consciousness spew type of thing. So let me start by giving a quick introduction to Hi-Fi Rush for those unfamiliar with it. Our main character Chai has traveled to the massive city-like campus of mega corporation Vandelay Technologies. He's volunteering for their new line of robotic limb replacements, dubbed Project Armstrong. Chai hopes to have his right arm replaced so he can fulfill his dream, to be a rock star. He gets more than he expected from his upgrade though. On top of getting a new arm outfitted with magnetic powers, his trusty MP3 player gets embedded into his chest, which shapes the world around him to its rhythm. It also paints a target on his back from the executives of Vandelay. He's a faulty product now, after all. This unintended defect serves as the catalyst for the game's focus on music. I guess the music itself would make sense to break down first, if only because every other part of the game is built around it. Rock and roll is the genre of choice for the majority of the soundtrack. Not only does this make sense narratively, it's also a smart design choice as well. Rock music is catchy. The emphasis on steady drum patterns and bass lines makes sure that the player will always have something clear to focus their hearing on when trying to find the beat during gameplay. Even if you have no idea how the theory side of music works at all, you can still feel the beat. The kick of a drum, the clap of a hi-hat, the steady strum of a guitar, they all set a clear, easy-to-follow pace. It doesn't matter when the music decides to shift genres either, they're sure to stick to this rule. It's hard not to tap my foot or bop my head along with the beat. Every piece of music used in the game, whether it's a licensed track or an original work, is hand-picked to seamlessly mesh with every moment. The original tracks that replace the licensed ones in streamer mode are built around the same speed, key, and chord progression to make sure the gameplay and presentation still feels the same, yet somehow still have their own completely unique vibe and, in some cases, are an even better fit. One of the coolest integrations of the music into the game's presentation is its use in cutscenes. Key moments and character actions will happen in sync with the rhythm.
Not bad.
It might seem like a small detail, but it's an important piece of the game's style. The first place I really noticed this was the build-up to the game's second boss, Rekka. First, she slams her fists together with a... Then, the camera zooms in with another...
The gloves are coming off.
Her giant gauntlets will power up like... And... The entire game is crafted with this amount of attention poured into its music. Everything just flows together. So how does the music work with the gameplay itself then? When pitching the game, director John Johannes described its design philosophy as a music video being edited around you. You see, everything moves in time to the beat of the music coming from Chai's MP3 player. The pace of his steps, the background elements to the levels, and of course, the gameplay itself. Everything is tied to the beat. This might seem daunting for those without a natural sense for rhythm, but the game will help accommodate you with things like an optional on-screen metronome and more lenient input timing on easier difficulties. This is the foundation of the gameplay, and it's from here that we can dig deeper into how and why this works the way it does. One of the most important pieces of an action game is its level design. I love the combat in the Devil May Cry games, please do not get me wrong, but I don't think I would enjoy them as much as I do without the environment you get to explore. They set the tone of the atmosphere perfectly. Plus, going off the beaten path and finding an upgrade item just feels good. I'm one of the few people who actually enjoys their use of platforming and collectibles. They keep me engaged and paying attention constantly, not just when I'm fighting. Hi-Fi Rush takes this idea to a ridiculous extreme. Each stage will have you go through a different part of the Vandelay campus to take down the department heads one by one. There's the many different factories of production, the underground test labs of R&D, the gigantic security tower, the list goes on. You still have your hidden paths and plenty of MacGuffins to find along the way too. The one thing that elevates all of this is how the world around you will move and react in time with the music. Platforms will activate and deactivate in time with the beat, which means you can know exactly how to time your jumps if you're really feeling the rhythm. Obstacles like lava geysers or trash compressors follow the same logic. An active volcano is way less scary once you realize you can figure out the timing and parry its blasts. You'll even need to keep track of the beat to find some secrets. For example, you can time a jump just right to land on top of one of these hanging containers and have it carry you to a hidden item. One of my favorite details is how as you progress through a stage, the music will progress as well. Each level is broken into multiple choruses that culminate in a combat encounter. In the first level, it'll start off relatively simple with a bass-driven progression. before it lets the distortion guitar take over for a while. Until finally, we get the whole band together when you leap sky high onto the rooftops for a battle.
Bring it on.
Another level has you making your way through a museum with bombastic brass playing during fights that gets toned down to a single chill guitar once the coast is clear. Just like a good song, it keeps you engaged by building and releasing tension. There's a careful, deliberate structure to it. The music is just as much part of the levels as the places in them. Alright, let's finally take a look at the combat. You've got your action game staples. Light and heavy attacks, a parry, a dodge, a jump, and a long-range magnetic grapple move. These moves are all, unsurprisingly, affected by the rhythm of the music. Light attacks take up 1 beat, so they function like a quarter note. Heavy attacks are 2 beats, so they're half notes. You'll unlock a variety of combos that weave these 2 attack types together in all sorts of ways. Jumps and dodges also take up 1 beat, grappling takes up 2 beats, and parries, well, parries are a bit special, so we'll talk more about them later. Where this can get really fun is making the most of perfectly timing your moves. Perfectly timed attacks will build up your score and rhythm meter faster, which is basically like the style meter in a Devil May Cry game, and your combo finishers will be stronger if timed right too. They'll also build up your special attack meter faster. Every combo will have its own rhythmic cadence to it you'll have to get used to. The basic light attack combo will go something like, which seems simple enough, but adding even a single heavy attack can change it to. You can also chain up to 3 dodges together if you land them right on the beat. The best part of all this, you'll get all sorts of feedback from the game letting you know when your timing is on point. Motion lines will flash on screen when you land a beat hit just right. The crowd will chant in time to your attacks as they land like you're doing a loop in a fighting game. The controller will vibrate the moment you press the dodge button right on top of the beat. You can see, hear, and feel your success all at once. It's synesthetic bliss. This is going to sound silly, but I've been subconsciously waiting years for a game to reward me for moving in time to the music. This is something I think I've done since playing Kingdom Hearts for the first time when I was a kid. I'm going back through my footage, and so much of it is me just dodging and jumping to the beat while I'm exploring a level. The game's pure fun. The mechanic I get this feeling the most with is the game's parry. I honestly think this might be my favorite parry in any game, period. Functionally, it works just like other parries in similar games. You use it right when an enemy's attack is about to connect to block it. Simple enough. What sets it apart is how the player figures out the timing for a parry. Just like everything else in the game, it's built around the rhythm of the music. Enemies will spend at least a beat or 2 winding up their attacks to give the player a visual cue they can grow to recognize. And many of the same attacks will also have an audio cue like a shing sound effect immediately before they need to parry. The audio cues in particular are brilliant because it means that even an attack coming from off-screen that you can't see is now reasonably responded to. But for me, the coolest thing about parries is that it's one of the only instances in the game where you'll need to time it off of the beat. I'm about to let the music student in me loose for a second, so bear with me. When timing all of your other actions, you're aiming for the blinking light from 808 that serves as a metronome. Each blink represents a single beat. There's still a small portion of time in between flashes though. This space in between beats is the offbeat. As you get further into the game, enemies will start to use attacks that will land off the beat. At first, they'll just add an extra note right in the middle of 2 beats to create an 8th note pattern. But as you progress, you'll run into patterns like this. I know this can seem unfair. Everything else is linked on the beat. But just like every other attack, These also have clear cues for the player to identify that build up the necessary anticipation to defend against them. You can't just tap the parry button every beat and hope for it to work. You need to really see, hear, and feel the enemy's moves. All of this culminates in the coolest type of set piece, the parry duel. Certain larger enemies and bosses can force you into a sequence where you'll be required to parry and dodge a series of attacks. You'll be given the pattern you need to deal with just once before you have to respond with the exact same rhythm. There's even an entire boss fight built around this mechanic. It's so good.
Way to go, Ty.
It's Parappa the Rapper, but with a lot more danger involved. One of the most interesting features of the game's combat is its use of assist characters. Throughout the course of the story, Chai will meet allies that he can call in for a helping hand during a fight. There are 3 characters total, each with their own special niches that their attacks fill. Peppermint uses a gun to safely damage enemies from afar as well as break energy barriers. Macaron uses his brute strength to slam enemies up close and destroy Z-shielding. And Corsica creates gusts of wind with her batons to put out flames and disorient enemies into taking more stun damage. It's kind of like the way the partners are implemented in The World Ends With You Final Remix, except you're not limited to just one of them at a time. Learning how to make the most out of each assist will take your arsenal to the next level. Your allies will do more than just help in combat through helping you deal with different roadblocks as you explore each level too. A fun combat system needs enemies that are fun to fight, and Hi-Fi Rush has some of the most fun enemies in any action game I've ever played. Just like every other aspect of the game, the behavior and actions of the enemies are tied to the rhythm of the music. You'll be given just enough time to recognize the windup to an attack before it lands right on top of the beat. A gunner will need to load and steady their weapon before firing, or a fighter with a shield will huddle up and lean back a few beats before charging forward, as a couple of examples. And like I mentioned before, you're not just able to see these things, but hear them too. The enemy variety is pretty great. While I wouldn't say there are a ton of enemies in the game, each one feels totally different. Outside of your basic combo fodder mooks, you've got commandos that can use swords and shields, pesky flyers that disrupt you when you least expect, quick unicycle bots that can generate barriers, giant mobile tank things that can launch mortars, a samurai that moonlights as a chef, a fire fighter. These are just a few of the ones I can think of off the top of my head. All of them have patterns that the player will slowly learn and adapt to over time, along with their own sets of strengths to be careful of and weaknesses to exploit. It feels like the game never runs out of new ways to utilize its enemies either. Every time you think you've gotten the hang of dealing with one, they'll pair it up with another that results in a fight that totally flips your understanding upside down. This type of thing continues to happen all the way to the end and into the post-game. It's cool. The highlights of an action game's enemy roster should be its bosses, and it's definitely the case here. They're these massive spectacles backed by some of the best tracks in the game, with the player in total control of the situation. Each boss has multiple phases, and each phase has its own dedicated section of the battle theme. It really strengthens their identities. Entire attacks are built to sync up with the various motifs of the music. It's extremely evident in the encounter with Roquefort, who has a remix of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony for his battle theme.
We can go up against it.
The only complaint I have about the bosses? I just wish there were more of them. I have so much fun learning their attack patterns and feeling out the timing to perfectly parry their scariest moves. These things are all good, great even. But the thing that makes Hi-Fi Rush's combat amazing is how the player needs to constantly be thinking about each of them in every encounter. If you have trouble feeling out the timing of your own attacks, then not only are you missing out on the bonuses I mentioned before, but you'll have a harder time dealing with enemies' attacks too. You need to learn how to time your parries to make it through the game's tougher encounters. You'll also need to learn how to make the most of your assists and how they interact with all of the different enemies. I'm gonna be honest, that's asking a ton for the player to deal with all at once. It's hard, and it's not something that you're going to understand straight away. It'll take time to learn all of the different mechanics and enemies you'll have to manage. You'll make mistakes and probably get your ass handed to you more than once. It'll be frustrating. Things will start to click little by little though, and you'll be consciously thinking about them less and less. And then, before you realize it, everything just becomes second nature. The more you play, the better you get. You'll be perfect parrying flurries of attacks that used to decimate you, making easy work of enemies that were impossible to deal with at one point, and earning the highest ranks on stages with ease. Just like Johannes said, the game has transformed into a living, breathing music video. The levels are the backing tracks, the gameplay is your instrument, and your own unique approach to how you play is the melody. You, the player, are the star of this crazy, wonderful performance. The entire game is built upon this sensation, and it's part of what makes the experience of playing it so special. If this were 7 months ago, right around the game's first anniversary, this would probably be where we start to wrap up this video. Things aren't that simple, though. I haven't talked much about the game's story up to this point, and there's an unfortunately relevant reason for that. Hi-Fi Rush is about the value of creativity in a world that wants nothing more than to bleed its creators dry for the sake of profit. During one level of the game, you make your way through a museum detailing Vandelay's history. You learn about its humble beginnings and founder Roxanne Vandelay's earnest desire to make the world a better place with the technology she created. Her goal was always to help others and find solutions to problems that would improve the lives of everyone. It's implied that Project Armstrong's prosthetic technology began after Roxanne made a replacement leg for Peppermint, her daughter, and was inspired to offer that technology to the rest of the world. Slowly, the company built up the trust and goodwill of the public with their consistent commitment to their ideals. It's this trust that the game's villain, Kale, took advantage of. He forcibly took over Vandelay for himself and set a plan into motion that would make anyone using the company's robotics a mindless slave. Is he doing this because he wants to dominate the world or something like that? No, he's doing it because he wants people to shut up and buy more of his products. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, as long as he has your cash, that's all that he cares about. It doesn't matter that all of his employees are miserable. He's happy, and that's most important. Almost everyone you meet throughout the game seems to have resigned themselves to this simply being the way things are always going to be. It's depressing. Then, Chai shows up. A 25-year-old dropout with no skills, no direction, and no place in the world. What he does have, though, is passion. From the first time we meet Chai, we get to see just how much his dream of being a rock star means to him. He's willing to sacrifice an arm if it means he's given a chance. But no one takes him seriously. The different heads of Vandelay, Kale in particular, constantly belittle him. He's not just a defect because of the MP3 player in his chest. His entire philosophy and attitude is defective in the eyes of those around him. He's loud, kind of obnoxious, and self-confident to a fault. Even so, he is who he chooses to be, not what everyone else says he should be, and he's got a goal that he wants to achieve for himself and no one else. Over the course of the story, he meets more and more people with similar motivations. Peppermint wants to honor her mother's years of dedication to the people. Macaron wants his R&D work to be meaningful again and used to better the world. Corsica wants to be a part of the company that she respected and idolized growing up. Cinnamon, well, I think he's just happy to be here. They don't immediately get along with one another either. They butt heads and disagree with each other constantly, especially Chai and Peppermint at first. As time goes on and they begin to understand each other more, they realize just how much they can accomplish working together. Not even a mega corporation can hold a candle to a ragtag band of misfits with drive and a dream. In the real world, that band of misfits is the team at Tango Gameworks. John Johannes had a vision for what he wanted to create, and with the help of the many, many people who worked on Hi-Fi Rush, he was able to realize that vision. If they just wanted to make a game that would sell well, there are so many easier paths they could have taken. They could have played it safe and just made another Evil Within, or even make some sort of soulless live service game designed to drain you of your time and money. They didn't, though. In an industry that's been plagued with the same recycled and rehashed ideas for what feels like an eternity, Tango was bold enough to put out something totally fresh and filled to the brim with care and attention to detail. Everyone recognized this. The players, the critics, the journalists. This game was something special, and we all knew it. They released major updates to the game that added entirely new modes that most developers would attach to a pricey season pass for free, just as a thank you to the support it received from the player base. In a just world, all of this would mean that the team had cemented itself as a permanent mainstay in gaming for years to come, veritable rock stars within the industry. Things didn't end up that way. In May of this year, Tango Gameworks was one of several Bethesda teams shut down by Xbox Game Studios through an email from its head. The email said that this reprioritization was meant to focus on high-impact titles and blockbuster games. This is just corporate speak for, your team didn't make us as much money as we wanted. Bye-bye. It's hilarious, because it's this exact type of mindless greed that Hi-Fi Rush constantly criticizes and makes fun of. Ever since this news came out, there's been a surge of people making videos on the game. They all lament the loss of Tango, and what that loss could mean for the gaming industry at large. It's a totally understandable reaction to the situation. In a lot of ways, I feel the same. As much as I'm tempted to do the same thing, and as simple as it would be to end this video on a message of gaming is doomed, I don't think that's the right thing for me to do here. It's not what I want to do. I don't want to mourn Hi-Fi Rush. I want to celebrate it. I want the world to know just how much this game means to me. I want to show how fun it can be to just move around a stage. I want to talk about how much I love this game's soundtrack and how it always complements whatever's happening on screen. I want to be able to convey the synesthetic bliss I feel from parrying an attack perfectly to the rhythm of the music, and I'm rewarded with a satisfying crash I can see, hear, and feel all at once. I want people to understand the work that went into all of the small details they might have overlooked. But I think more than anything, I really just want to say thank you to Tango. Thank you for reminding me why I started creating things and how fulfilling it can be. Thank you for making something that could have only been possible with the passion and love of everyone on the team working together. The very last song on the game's soundtrack is called Making Things is Hard. It's a heartfelt letter from the developers to the player, straight from the voice of John Johannes. He talks about how difficult it was to build the game and the unforeseen challenges they faced, from feature bloat to deadlines. It was never going to go perfectly, and they had to make compromises and hard choices to get it done. This didn't stop them, and when the going got tough, their solutions got creative. He is so proud of what his team put together. All of the time they poured into it, every bit of ingenuity that allowed its ideas to work, every disagreement over how they could make those ideas even better. It was all worth it in the end. Because in the end, they did it all for us. Not for some faceless corporation's bottom line, but for the joy they hoped it would bring to everyone who got the chance to play their game. Every one of these names is a real person who gave their all to create something this special. If I have one call of action for you from this video, it's to really pay proper attention to the credits of the next game you play. Who are the programmers, the level designers, the battle planners, the writers, the voice actors, the QA testers, the concept artists, the character designers, the environment designers, the animators, the production managers, the audio team, the localization team? Pay attention to all of these names, because they are all people who devoted themselves to creating the games we play. Without them, the games simply wouldn't exist. Companies don't make games. People make games. This is how I want Hi-Fi Rush to be remembered. It's the culmination of everything that I've grown to love about video games over the years. I didn't even talk about all the stuff in it I think is awesome, like its gorgeous art style or endearing sense of humor. Even though it doesn't fit the modern expectations of the industry, it knows what it wants to be and embraces it. From its release as a new IP with no marketing to its niche approach to gameplay, it should have been destined to fail miserably. It didn't, though. It left an undeniable mark that'll be remembered in the years to come. Gaming as an industry is struggling. There's no doubt about that. It feels like every day there's news of layoffs and studio shutdowns. It can be discouraging. But gaming as a medium, as an art form, it's got so much potential for growth and new amazing ideas just like Hi-Fi Rush. In spite of everything that's happened in recent years, I truly believe that as long as we nurture the passion of our game developers and allow them to push the boundaries of their creativity, this is just the first side of the great EP we call video games. I don't think I'm alone in that either. During the course of writing this video, it was announced that the Korean publisher Krafton had purchased ownership of Tango Gameworks from Microsoft, along with the Hi-Fi Rush IP. Around half of the original staff would stay with the team, and they would be able to keep their original positions too. Effectively, Tango had come back from the dead. This is incredible news, absolutely. I think it's important to remember why this is such good news, though. We need to remember what went into Hi-Fi Rush that gave it its success. The people who made it. They are the real rock stars. And now, they get to keep making the things they love. Together, they're showing the world what video games could and really should be. The only thing I can call that is a miracle.